Hi, I'm Jeff Bloomberg and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at MGE. This week's tip is part 3 of 3 on the do's and don'ts of additional locations. If you missed parts 1 and 2, I've made little playlists to catch you up. You can find it by clicking here. Opening additional locations should be an exciting thing, but I've seen it all too often turn out where, it ends up being a stressful thing for people. So I ask these 8 questions just to make sure that a person is positioned properly before they take the plunge, so to speak. Now, I've covered questions 1 through 5 in the prior tip, so we're going to pick up with question 6 that I ask, which is, are you opening a scratch or an existing practice? You buying an existing practice? Now, I ask this question mainly out of curiosity and also to see what type of a situation the client is stepping into. Neither is the right answer. Both of these can be very workable. The only thing I like to see is this. You had location 1, and there are probably things about it that you didn't like or you wish you could have done differently. You've also learned a lot, having been in location 1 for a while, and you can take this knowledge to help you in location 2. Well, then make sure location 2 is exactly what you want. Don't buy something because you feel like you have to buy something. You don't have to make it take forever, but find the right place. Equip it the way that you want. Make sure it has all the space that you want for expansion. You're not in any rush, not again that you have to take forever, but do it the way that you want to. All right, but it's something to consider because you want to look at, and we've talked about this in the prior tips, how it's going to affect location 1, and obviously whether it's scratch or an existing practice, that's going to affect your degree of participation in it. The next question I ask is, how is the office staffed, or how are you going to staff this office? Now, obviously, if it's a scratch practice, there are no staff. So how would I do this? Ideally, the first person you start off with should be somebody who can grow into the office manager position. Now, there's a few ways you can do that. You can look at the staff in location 1 and maybe select somebody there who you could train and move into location 2 as the office manager. Make sure they're replaced properly. If you're going to take the existing office manager from 1 and move them to 2, again, double, make sure they're replaced properly. Or you may have to bring in somebody from the outside to put in as the staff member in location 2. I would ideally do it a little bit before you open location 2 and train them in location 1, assuming they're not too far apart, so they can kind of get a bit of a feel for how you want things to run. Now, let's say you're buying an existing location and the place is already staffed. Well, there's a few things you're going to want to look at. The first thing I would do is I would talk to the doctor owner and get a real assessment of the staff that they have there, an honest assessment. I would also, even if the office didn't carry any type of statistics or performance benchmarks, there's things I could look at to sort of put together how these people were performing and find out, who's performing well and who's not. The next thing I would want to do is actually observe these staff in action. How do they work? Are there any staff that are problems or don't treat patients right? Are there any particular staff that are doing very well? Because I'm looking at potentially keeping these people. And once I've done these things, I have to take a look at where I'm at with regards to salaries. In a lot of cases, when you're buying an existing location, the doctor you're buying from has already serviced all their debt associated with that location. Well, you may be coming in with a lot of debt. So, especially in locations that have been for a while, you might find salaries are a little bit out of line. Now, how much should salaries be? I've talked about this in various overhead videos. If you want to, look at them, I've got a playlist of them here that you can look at. But just in a nutshell, staff salaries, not including you or the associate, including taxes though, should never exceed 22.5% of collections. So if they're out of line, you might have a bit of a problem. So again, you want to compare salaries to performance. And the next thing is, how well is the office actually doing? What if the office is doing real well? Well, the staff that are there had a lot to do with the office doing real well. Well then, if an area is doing real well, I'm going to walk in and I'm not going to just make, everybody wants to put their own mark on things. You see it in sports or a new executive takes over a company. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases when this happens, people want to come in and, put their brand on a company or a sports team and they wreck it. All right? If the office is running well and those staff are part of that, I would walk in very cautiously. I would make very little change. And because they're a part of what's making it go well. And I would observe it when I do make changes, or when I did make changes, I would make sure that I looked at what I did and make sure that it didn't mess up what was already going on. And the last thing is this, you're really not going to know, despite all the recommendations, how these staff are until you actually work with them. So you want to work with them and gain your own experience with them to find out, who's working and who's not. And obviously, as we've recommended in numerous videos before, you should have an employment attorney you work with if you have any questions about things like this that you can consult with to help you with any of these decisions. The last question is, how are you going to administer the finances? Now, why do I ask these questions? Because I've seen in way too many cases where a person has 2 or 3 offices and everything is just mishmashed. We're big believers that an organization should stand on its own. So if you're going to have a second office, you want to have the finances separated to the degree that you can see this office is surviving well on its own, and so is this one. Now, that's not to say, especially as you get more than 2 offices, or even 2 if they're large enough, that you can't centralize certain functions because you can save money that way. Certain things you could centralize would include marketing, labs, supplies, possibly training or hiring, assuming you have enough offices, because you can actually save money that way. The more offices you have, the more buying power that you have and the better deals that you can negotiate. And it's something to look for as you grow. But minimally, and again, you'd want to consult your tax or accountant or tax professional or accountant on these things. We recommend that you keep them separate. You want to keep them separate so you can see from a production perspective that each one is supporting itself. So those are the 8 questions I ask, and I hope you ask yourself these questions too before you go into location 2. Don't take too long. You don't want to slow expansion down, but it's fun to, or it's wise to at least consider a few things before you plunge into something only to regret it later. That said, I hope this helped. If you like this tip or you'd like to see other tips like it, go ahead and click the subscribe button below. You'll be informed as new tips come out, just as they come out. And if you're not a GP, you're a specialist, the ideas on multiple locations are a little bit different than with a GP. If you'd like to contact me directly, you can email me at jeff@mgeonline.com. I'm more than happy to answer your questions. Otherwise, if you have questions about MGE, you can find us online at mgeonline.com or call us at 800-640-1140. Thank you.